Give us the house, Vivian. Just sign it over. Or I swear to God, you will regret the day you ever came back here. That was my aunt, standing in my grandmother's kitchen, the one that still smelled like cinnamon and dish soap, holding a manila envelope like it was a weapon. My grandmother had been dead for 11 days. I didn't sign. Let me back up. My grandmother, Nana Bet, raised me. Not in the soft cookies on Sunday way people romanticize. She raised me the way someone raises a child when no one else steps up. Because my mother checked out when I was 6, and my father was never really in the picture to begin with. Nana Bet was a retired school librarian from Dayton, Ohio, and she had a 2-story house on Elmfield Road that she'd paid off herself, a savings account she built over 40 years, and the kind of quiet dignity that made people lower their voices when she walked into a room. She also had 2 daughters, my mother, Deborah, who left, and my Aunt Lorraine, who stayed, but only in the way a shadow stays, always hovering, always watching, but never actually doing anything. I moved in with Nana Bet when I was 7. Lorraine moved her own family into the house next door when I was 12, which felt less like coincidence and more like positioning. Her husband, my uncle by marriage, was a general contractor who was always one bad quarter away from financial trouble. Their son, my cousin, was the kind of guy who posted motivational quotes online and borrowed money from elderly relatives. Nana Bet never complained about any of them. That was her way. She saw the best in people, or at least she pretended to, because she believed the alternative was worse. I left for college at 18, came back at 22 when she started having trouble with her knee, stayed until she got her surgery and physical therapy done, then found a job in Columbus and visited every other weekend. My aunt used to joke that I was checking up on the investment. I used to laugh it off. I shouldn't have. When Nana Bet got her dementia diagnosis 2 years ago, I took 2 weeks off work to help her set up her estate. We sat at her kitchen table with a lawyer named Mr. Card, Osei, who she'd used for decades, and she was clear-eyed and deliberate about every decision. She left the house to me. The savings split between me and a couple of local charities she loved. A small separate account for my mother, if she ever resurfaced. Lorraine received the jewelry collection, antique pieces, genuinely valuable, and the furniture she'd always coveted. Is that going to cause problems? Mr. Osei asked gently after we'd gone through everything. Nana Bet folded her hands on the table. It'll cause exactly as many problems as she decides to make. She was right. Nana Bet died on a Tuesday in February. Peaceful, in her own bed, with me holding one hand and a home health aide holding the other. Lorraine arrived 40 minutes after I called her. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, looked at her mother's body, and then looked at me and said, "We need to talk about the house." I told her it wasn't the time. She said there was never a good time for these conversations. I told her I'd be in touch with Mr. Backer, Osei, and walked back to my grandmother's bedside. The funeral was on a Friday. I held it together through the service, through the reception, through 2 hours of people telling me Nana Bet had been the best thing that ever happened to them, which I believed completely. My aunt stood beside me like we were united in grief. She hugged people who came through the line. She told the story about Nana Bet's famous peach pie 3 times. She was a perfect grieving daughter. That night, after everyone left, she came to me in the kitchen while I was washing dishes and placed the manila envelope on the counter. "I've had a lawyer look at everything," she said. I turned off the water. "The will is going to be contested. My lawyer says there are strong grounds. Mama's cognitive decline, the circumstances of the change in beneficiaries, your influence over her at a vulnerable time." I stood very still. I knew my hands were wet. I remember thinking that clearly. My hands are wet and I need to not react yet. "The house should be in the family," she said. "Your name isn't even on the deed yet. If you just sign a quitclaim, we avoid probate, we avoid legal fees, we avoid all of this being ugly." I asked her what she meant by the family. She meant herself. I picked up the envelope. Inside was a quitclaim deed, already filled out with my name, already dated, transferring ownership of 44L17 Elmfield Road to Lorraine and her husband. Notarized lines were blank. My signature line was highlighted in yellow. I put it back down. I need to talk to Mr. O.C., I said. He works for the estate. He's not your personal lawyer. I know that. Vivian, I said I need to talk to Mr. O.C. I went upstairs. I locked the door. I called my boyfriend, Derek, who I'd been with for 3 years, a steady, careful man who worked in insurance and had the rare ability to be furious and rational at the same time. I told him what happened. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Don't sign anything. Don't touch anything. I'm coming tomorrow morning." I lay on my grandmother's guest bed that night and stared at the ceiling. The house still smelled like her. Lavender fabric softener and old books, and something warm I could never quite name. I thought about being 7 years old and sleeping in the same room because there was nowhere else to go. I thought about her teaching me to read a lease agreement when I turned 18. I thought about her saying quietly on the day we met with Mr. Notary, "Oh, say, this house should go to the person who loved it like a home, not the person who always looked at it like real estate." I didn't sleep much. Derek arrived at 8 in the morning. My aunt's car was already in the driveway of the house next door. She'd gone home the previous night, but had clearly been watching. She came over before Derek had even gotten his coat off, her son walking behind her with his hands in his pockets like backup. She'd called in. "I just want to have a conversation," she said. Derek said calmly, "We're going to call Mr. Osei first." "He doesn't." "We're going to call Mr. Osei first." He said it the same way, same tone. He's good at that. Lorraine looked at me. "You're making this into something it doesn't have to be." I looked back at her. Was the will changed at any point? After the original filing in 2022? She blinked. "Because I have a copy of everything from the date it was drafted." I was there. I have notes from that meeting. I have the follow-up correspondence from Mr. Assay's office, and I have my grandmother's medical records showing her cognitive assessments at the time, which were reviewed by her neurologist and deemed sufficient for legal decision-making. I had spent 3 hours on my phone the night before. I knew what I had. "You had her isolated," Lorraine said, and her voice had gone cold. "She had a home health aide who kept a daily log. She had doctor's appointments I drove her to, with physicians who have documented records. She had phone calls with her church friends 3 times a week. None of that is isolation." My cousin shifted behind her. Something in his posture changed, not his mother's posture. Something smaller, less certain. "This is going to get expensive," she said. "It might," I agreed. "For whoever loses." She left. Her son glanced at me once before he followed, and I noticed he didn't meet my eyes. Derek and I called Mr. O.C. from the kitchen table. He was not surprised by what I described. He told me he'd been anticipating a challenge and had prepared documentation accordingly. He referred me to a probate attorney in Columbus named Patricia Hale, who he said was precise and thorough. I called Patricia Hale that afternoon. She picked up on the second ring, which I took as a sign. Over the next 3 weeks, I went through my grandmother's house methodically, not like a grieving granddaughter trying to process loss, though I was doing that too, but like someone building a case. I found every document, every letter, every piece of mail. I found birthday cards from Nana Bet to me spanning 26 years, every single one with something written inside beyond the printed text. I found her journal, which I didn't read in full, that felt wrong, but which I noted existed and was intact. I photographed everything, labeled it, and sent scanned copies to Patricia. What I also found, tucked into a folder in Nana Bet's filing cabinet in the study, was a copy of a letter. It was addressed to Mr. Osei, dated 8 months before she died, in my grandmother's handwriting, slightly shakier than it had been, but recognizably hers. It said that she was aware certain members of her family had been pressuring her to alter her estate plan, that she was documenting her intent clearly and without coercion, and that her wishes remained as filed. She'd had it notarized at a UPS store 3 blocks from her house. The notary stamp was clear. I sat on the floor of the study with that letter in my hands for a long time. She knew. She had known what was coming, and she had prepared for it quietly, the same way she had done everything in her life, without drama, without announcement, just methodically doing what needed to be done. I cried for the first time since the funeral. Patricia Hale called it a contemporaneous statement of testamentary intent. She sounded genuinely pleased, in the controlled way lawyers allow themselves to sound pleased. Meanwhile, my aunt filed her challenge. It was framed around undue influence and questioned my grandmother's capacity. Their lawyer sent a letter claiming I had systematically limited access to Nana Bet in her final years and had manipulated a vulnerable elder for financial gain. I read it standing at my kitchen counter in Columbus. My hands didn't shake. I was past the point where words like that could make my hands shake. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone outside of Patricia and Derek, was what my cousin had said to me. 3 days after the confrontation in the house, he called me. Not his mother's number, his own cell. He asked if we could talk. I said yes, but I told Derek I was putting it on speaker, and I sat very quietly and let my cousin talk. He talked for 40 minutes. He told me his mother had been planning this since before Nana Bet's diagnosis, that Lorraine had told him the house was as good as hers, and that the updated will was just my mother getting confused. He told me she had pushed him to befriend me at the funeral, so I would be more likely to sign the quitclaim quickly before I thought too hard about it. He told me she had said, and I felt something go cold in my chest when I heard this, that she had already picked out what she was doing with the upstairs. She had walked through her mother's house before the body was even cold and decided what she was doing with the upstairs. My cousin's voice broke a little at the end. He said he didn't want any part of it anymore. He said he thought what his mother was doing was wrong. He said he was sorry. I said thank you. I said I appreciated him calling. I didn't tell him what I intended to do with what he'd told me. I called Patricia immediately after. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can he put that in writing?" He could. He did. An affidavit, sworn and signed, delivered to Patricia's office in Columbus 2 weeks later. It outlined what his mother had told him, including specific statements and timelines that directly contradicted the claims in the challenge filing. The morning the affidavit was submitted to probate court, my phone lit up with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Lorraine using a neighbor's phone. She said we needed to talk. She said things had gotten out of hand. She said she missed her mother and she wasn't thinking clearly and maybe there was a way to work this out. I played it for Patricia. Patricia said, "I'd like to use that." The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday in April. I drove up from Columbus the night before and stayed in a hotel because I couldn't make myself sleep in the house while this was still unresolved. Derek came with me. We didn't talk much at dinner, which was fine. We've been together long enough that silence between us is just comfortable, not loaded. In the morning, I wore the gray blazer Nana Bet had bought me when I graduated college. I don't know why I chose that specifically. It felt right. We sat across from my aunt and her lawyer at a table in a conference room downtown. Lorraine looked like she hadn't been sleeping. Her lawyer looked like someone who had started to realize the shape of the case he was in. The mediator started. Lorraine's lawyer laid out their position. Then Patricia laid out ours, the original will, the contemporaneous letter, the medical documentation, the home health aid logs, the phone records, the birthday cards, and finally, the affidavit. When the affidavit was introduced, Lorraine turned to look at the door, as if she expected someone to come through it. I think she was looking for her son. He wasn't there. Her lawyer asked for a recess. They took 45 minutes. When they came back, the challenge was withdrawn. There were conditions, a small cash payment that I agreed to because Patricia said it would end things faster and I wanted it to end. There was a mutual release of claims. There was paperwork that took another 6 weeks to finalize. But the house stayed mine. I drove to Elmfield Road the day the deed was officially transferred into my name. I sat in the driveway for a while before going in. The azaleas Nana Bet had planted along the front walk were starting to come in, pink and stubborn, the way they were every spring. Inside, I walked through each room slowly. The study where I'd found the letter, the kitchen where I'd learned to make biscuits and later, to read a legal document without flinching. The guest room where I'd slept at 7 and again at 31, in entirely different kinds of uncertain nights. I haven't decided yet what I'm doing with it long term, whether I'll live here, rent it, or keep it as the thing it's always been, which is a place that means I belong somewhere. That part I'm still figuring out. What I know is that my grandmother spent her whole life doing the right thing quietly. She didn't make speeches. She didn't fight in ways that drew attention. She just documented, prepared, and trusted that the truth would hold if she laid it down carefully enough. The only thing she ever asked of me directly was to be the person who loved that house like a home. I intend to keep that promise. I keep thinking about that filing cabinet, the way the folder was just sitting there, behind the hanging tabs labeled in my grandmother's neat librarian handwriting. She hadn't hidden it. She hadn't locked it away. She just put it where it belonged and trusted that someone would look. That's what gets me most, even now. Nana Bet didn't fight loud. She never called anyone out at the dinner table, never sent the kind of email that gets forwarded around a family for years. She just did the quiet, deliberate work of a person who understood that integrity isn't something you announce. It's something you build, slowly, in the small decisions nobody's watching. When she sat down with Mr. Worrell, OC, and wrote that letter and walked 3 blocks to get it notarized, she wasn't thinking about winning. She was thinking about what was right, and she was making sure the record reflected it. I used to think that kind of patience was passive, that keeping your head down and doing things correctly was what people did when they didn't have the courage to fight. I don't think that anymore. What Lorraine mistook for weakness in my grandmother, and honestly, what she mistook for weakness in me, was actually something she couldn't replicate because it requires a foundation she never built. You can't manufacture a 40-year paper trail of honest dealings at the last minute. You can't fake the kind of person who keeps every birthday card, who answers every letter, who shows up consistently and without agenda. The record either exists or it doesn't. And Lorraine's record existed too. That was the other thing. Every pressure tactic, every comment about the house being as good as hers, every conversation she had with her son while she thought she was just venting, that was documentation too. Just not the kind she intended to leave behind. Derek told me once, early in the probate process when I was exhausted and doubting everything, that the truth doesn't need a lot of help. It just needs time and room to be visible. I wrote that down because I needed to hold on to something, and because I thought he was right even when it didn't feel that way. What I know now is that outcomes like mine don't come from luck. They come from a specific combination of things that anyone can choose to develop, but that not everyone does. They come from doing right by people even when it's inconvenient, for long enough that it becomes evidence. They come from thinking clearly under pressure, from knowing which documents matter, which calls to record, which lawyers to call on a Saturday, instead of reacting from panic or anger. And they come from refusing to fold when someone is counting on your exhaustion. Lorraine was counting on me to be too tired, too grieving, too eager for it to be over. I was all of those things. I just wasn't willing to let those feelings make my decisions. My grandmother built a life that could defend itself. I'm still learning how to do the same, but I have her house and her filing cabinet and the memory of how she moved through the world carefully, honestly, without making a performance of either. That's the inheritance that actually mattered.